It's been a minute since I've done videos like this, but here we go. In this video, I'm going to cover essentially what is keyhole and give a couple examples and when to use it and when not to use it. So generally speaking, this is a more advanced form of F2L, but I think it's good to understand and maybe even start incorporating this into your solves earlier. Some mini side plugs: you can get cubes for 5% off at thecubicle.com with my discount code Dana. And if you're curious about money and finance, I do have a second channel, so love to see you there. Anyway, what is keyhole? So keyhole is applicable when you have an F2L pair where either the corner or the edge is solved. So in this case, the corner is solved, and in this case, just the edge is solved. Additionally, to be able to do keyhole, you need at least one other unsolved pair. And the idea is that you use these free pairs as sort of buffer slots to insert corners into. So for example, normally for a pair like this, you might do something like this, but if you do keyhole, you can use the fact that this F2L pair is empty and that you need to solve this one and this corner is here. So if you think about it, you use this pair as a buffer, and if you insert this into here as if you were inserting a regular corner piece, once you bring it back, it'll solve the pair. So again, this is where it needs to go. You insert it and you insert it back. So if we count the moves from this angle here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if we count the normal way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So that's one of the benefits of keyhole. It's generally more efficient in terms of move count, which obviously is good. You want fewer moves so that your solve can be faster. So that was an example of the edge being solved and the corner being unsolved. Let's do an example where the corner is solved, but the edge is unsolved. So in this case, as you can clearly see, this corner is solved and the edge is unsolved. I'm going to use this pair sort of as my buffer, so that I can bring it in so that I can basically do whatever I want to these pieces, and once I rotate it back, this pair doesn't get messed up because it's not solved. And in this case, I'm going to use this back pair as my buffer, bring in the corner, and insert this edge into this pair like so. And note that when I bring it back, the F2L pair is solved and we haven't messed up the rest of the cube. Normally a case like this will take quite a few moves, but in this case, if you do the version that I sort of showed before, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So much fewer moves than a normal insert there. Now I'm going to take this one step further. This is a little bit advanced, so if you're still working on keyhole or are a little bit more beginner, don't worry, but you can use keyhole in a more advanced way to essentially what is called pseudo-slotting, where you can solve two pairs at once. So one example of that, this would actually be a really good example here. If you'll notice, for pseudo-slotting, you need two pairs of which one of has an edge solved and one of has the corner solved. So obviously in this case, red, green is solved, the white, green, orange corner is solved, and the corresponding corners and edges are unsolved. So we can use the previous sort of idea of using buffer slots, but instead of using a random slot, so we can use these two pairs sort of as a buffer slot. And the pseudo-slotting part of this comes from, if you treat this as an F2L pair, it's like a pseudo F2L pair. Watch what happens when I insert this like this. It solves the keyhole for both this pair and this pair. I'll show that again. Again, to recognize this edge is solved, this corner is solved, and these two pieces are unsolved, and you insert the pseudo pair and then undo your buffer setup. So that's a little bit more advanced, and I'll try and give some general tips as to when you should use this and when you should not use this. In general, it's a good idea to solve pairs into the back left and back right so that you can see more of the cube. Obviously, if you solve pairs here, then you're gonna have to either rotate or look around to the back of the cube to see what's unsolved. So you can kind of apply this to keyhole. For example, if I'm holding the cube like this and I realize that I can use keyhole to solve this pair, instead of rotating and inserting like so, I could, from this angle, set it up, insert, and put it back so that the pair gets solved into the back, which would be slightly more advantageous in terms of being able to see the rest of the cube, which is, of course, good for look ahead. So if you can, solve the pairs into the back, like so. Another really useful case, I think, is when you have this rather annoying case where the corner is solved and the edge is flipped. If you have an open slot, you're in luck. What you can do, instead of either taking it out and pairing it up again, or another weird algorithm, you can use one of these empty slots, bring the corner in as a buffer, and flip this edge, and bring it back. So again, and you can do so with sledgehammer, 3-move insert, and that's generally faster than taking it out and pairing it up and putting it back in. Another really useful use case scenario for Keyhole is to plan X crosses. For example, let's say you got super lucky and this was your scramble. This is just sort of proof of concept. It's highly unlikely you'll get a scramble like this, but it is possible that you can set up to something like this. Note that all it would take to solve the entire cross would be a D2, but also note that this corner is solved. So if I solve this edge and then bring back the corner, this pair would be solved. So similar to before, in this case, it's going to be the red-blue edge. So I can insert the red-blue edge, and then once I solve the cross, the entire pair will be solved. So Keyhole I find super useful in planning X crosses. It's not always a great idea to use Keyhole, so when should you not use Keyhole? I came up with 3 scenarios here, and I'll try and give an example for each one of them. Also, side note, I wonder if you can tell who my favorite Avengers are. Okay, so a case where I generally do not recommend using Keyhole is if you have this case where the edge is solved and the corner is facing up. To use Keyhole to solve it, you could do this and then insert the corner. However, it's just about the same number of moves and just as efficient to do essentially triple sexy. So I generally don't use it if I have the edge solved and corner facing up. Another case where I generally don't use Keyhole is if in order to use Keyhole, I need to do a D2. In this case, for example, this edge is solved, this corner is obviously not solved, but the only free pair is in the back. So I would need to do like a D2 and then insert in the back and then bring it back. However, I don't really like doing D2s, and in this case, I would rather do something like this. Another case in which I don't really use Keyhole is if there's another easier pair. This is an example of that. So I would notice that, oh look, this corner is solved, the edge is unsolved, so I could do something like, I'll just rotate here so it's easier to see. I could do something like this, right? However, if you look around the cube for a little bit more, you realize this pair is already solved, so you can quickly insert it and then you can actually do the same Keyhole. But the idea here is if there is a exceptionally easier pair, then I would usually do that before doing Keyhole. So I might do something like this and then insert it into the back like so using Keyhole, and then nothing really special here. Okay. Hopefully this video didn't turn out too long, but I think Keyhole is a really important part of F2L that even if you are a beginner, you should sort of understand how it works and maybe try incorporating it into your solves. I really like using it, and it's definitely helped on a lot of my solves. So hopefully you learned something, and I'll see you guys next time.